My question is for Aliza. Does any of the work that you do, either in your climate education or in your polyclinics or for the UN, do you do any work on things like natural-based solutions, you know, the rebuilding or the rewilding of natural habitats to promote sustainability in coordination with local communities and that sort of thing? 'Cause it's an exciting frontier in climate work.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's one of the main ways to actually have some solutions that work in the long term. That's groundwork. I'm not directly involved in those projects, but as a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, I have the opportunity to look at some of these projects happening in person. So through the UN Habitats work specifically, we have been on ground in Mozambique, in Malawi, and in Kenya, where they have reforestation programs and social programs that almost act like a life cycle. And so they will build schools, they will ensure that the farming land is not cropped out, the animals have their wildlife, there's reforestation programs there. The wildlife is, safe in the environment. It's not a safari zone. And so they're almost hoping that this natural life cycle, which would exist without a lot of human impact, continues to do so. And in terms of to do with natural-based solutions, I'm not aware of any work that the United Nations is doing on ground in Africa, but I believe they are looking into research in this regard with China. So there's lots of developments across the front, and this reminds me of one of the complications at the UN is, while it's doing lots of amazing work through lots of different projects, it's really hard to distill at the end the information that we get through, for example, the UN Habitat or the UNDP or the UN ODC. There's lots of different programs and franchises that they have working in private-public sector collaborations. The impact is inevitable. We see KPIs in lots of different reports, but I wish there was a centric way to actually configure how are we battling against the shocking climate statistics that we saw in the video earlier today. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, sorry, but just follow up on that. I think
Yes.
that's a really, you just mentioned something really exciting, which is the coalitions that are built inside. I think a lot of people feel like there's limited opportunity to work in the climate space if you're not in international development or you're not working for international organizations. But of course, there are a lot of climate communities in the private sector as well, aren't there? Things like the Network for Greening the Financial Sector and Climate Action
Absolutely.
100. So that's a way our industry can be involved in that.
Can I make a comment?
Of course, yeah.
So, just think about the insurance industry and nature-based solutions. So, we did a transaction last year where we put an insurance wrapper around a coral reef, and it was a successful attempt in trying to find a way of attributing some real value to a natural asset. Obviously, around the coral reef, there's an enormous ecosystem which depends on it. There's fishing, there's tourism, there's all that kind of thing. So what we did was we came together as a there's a risk management element, and then there's a protection element, and it helps us. It gives notional value. It gives more than notional. It gives hard value to the asset. It provides protection to the economy in the event that something shocking happens to it, which we don't want to happen. But it also came with this risk management element to help everybody understand how to stop the problem happening in the first place. So it's a very sort of virtuous circle, and I think it was it was a boatload of insurance analytics, which our industry is very, very good at, by the way, that enabled that transaction to be kind of structured and valued. So it's a really good practical way of looking at how our industry can start to use these big levers that it's got in its hands to start to recognise some of these important things. And there's a real weakness in the insurance sector right now in recognising nature-based solutions as a de-risking mechanism. And I think that's another thing to kind of for this group to start to sort of mentally chew on as you go back to your jobs. Sorry.
No, of course. I think it just relating back and resonating from your question and the comments. I think again, there's a public sector, there's a private sector. We've got human-based solutions, nature-based solutions. And ultimately, do you need to find a decor between the two, a balance between the two? Yes. What proportion is that? Is it 80-20? Is it 50-50? We're not sure. Even climate scientists don't have the answer. But the idea is that there is a sense of objectives, and that's in relation to do with, again, real KPIs. We've got the strength in terms of data analytics. And I'm hoping that we can see more and more climate-oriented jobs in the private sector, which have specific positions
within a hierarchy of organizations to say, oh, this specific role is not just the head of sustainability policy, but actually we've got people under him that look at the metrics that we produce or the amount of budget that's allocated to sustainability measures. And so I hope that in this regard, there's more progress. Ultimately, there's a lot of positives, and I guess that we have to work with them and adapt. Thank you.
Any more questions?